The council understands the vital importance of protecting Looe, not just for the town itself, but for the wider economy of the whole of South East Cornwall. It's predicted that flooding in Looe will actually cover a 6-fold increase in surface area to what it currently does, and we know that the situation at the moment is bad. The predictions would suggest that areas such as the railway station, the GP's practice, will all come within the scope of the flood resilience. The police station, the lifeboat station, all of these areas will become susceptible to flooding.
When we had the consultations back in April, May, we realised that actually a lot of people hadn't got the history of the project, and it's been developed over the last 20 years. We've only got involved recently. So our last consultation felt that we needed to go back over options that had previously been looked at and maybe discounted. So this particular consultation, we're actually now taking people through those options, and we're showing them the advantages and disadvantages of each of those options before looking at our preferred scheme at the moment.
The preferred option is to build a tidal barrier, roughly in line with the R&I building. Have a flood defence which links that tidal barrier with higher ground, and then to shelter the tidal barrier so that we can build it lower, we have an extension to Banjo Pier and a southern breakwater, and then lastly there's a suspended walkway linking Hannaford and Pennyland. That has the advantage of allowing us to build the tidal barrier to a lower height, and it allows us to build the tidal barrier and do the works in closer to the town during the winter when it's quieter. It also provides a refuge area for boats when the tidal barrier is closed and during construction when access to the harbour might be restricted. We've looked at demountable defences, so those would be flood walls you take up and put down when flooding's predicted. Permanent flood walls around the harbour, extending the quay walls and building a new wall in front of them. And we've looked at building a tidal barrier by itself without the breakwaters.
We're investigating a plan for adaptation in Looe, because as well as building any hard defences or carrying out any other work to prevent flooding, is we also have to think about in the future how we adapt to it, because whatever we do now won't be enough for the future. With climate change and sea level rise, defences are going to become overwhelmed at some point, so you need to determine what to do in the future. We're going to work with the local community as part of the project to first of all tell them around what the flood risk is at the moment and how it will change in the future, and then talk to them about what we can do in the town to adapt to it. So you might have to think about using buildings differently or moving things, but we appreciate that people have a working town at the moment, so it's not a decision that ourselves, the Environment Agency or Cornwall Council can make. We have to work with the local community to make sure whatever plans we do come up with fit the way they want it to work. What you don't want to do is something called maladaptation, which means where you build something or put something new in, then that then makes it more difficult to carry out your adaptation in the future.
Part of the environmental impact assessment is heritage and culture and visual impacts. So we've got here today with us 3D models of how those new structures would look, and we'll be developing those alongside our design so we can assess those visual impacts and try and avoid them where we can. We've done extensive marine ecological surveys, and again the impact on the marine life will be assessed as part of the environmental impact assessment. We're also looking about how we can green those new structures to incorporate and mitigate impacts on the marine environment.
It's got a beautiful heritage, and we want to celebrate that heritage. So I've been talking to a couple of local artists here in Cornwall about what we could do with public art for the scheme and how we could get perhaps local schools involved. And they've been very enthusiastic and very keen to get involved at such an early stage in the project. And from my previous experiences, I know that running public art through is not something you bolt onto the project, it's something that's integral with your final design. We'll collate them all together, and we're building a huge database of all these comments, all the negatives, all the positives, and then we're taking what we can to affect the final design, and we're feeding that back to the design team as we go. The next steps are to do more in terms of the design. We've gone through our design intent statements. Now we've got to deliver on those in statements. We've got to finish off our environmental surveys, which we started quite a little while ago, and we're almost on the verge of finishing now. And that runs through to an environmental impact assessment. But ultimately it's about delivering a business case for the project, and we're looking to deliver that to government in February, March time next year.